So CDP providers were advised on May 12 this year that participation in activities would now be voluntary, removing the mutual obligation component. Now, providers report the simultaneous announcement of the policy change and implementation have created communications and implementation challenges on the ground. So why were the mutual obligation components removed without their consultation?
So, Senator, first, just to be clear, because I think that there's a bit of misinformation
clarify.
Let me clarify. Mutual obligations absolutely still exist in remote areas. Job seekers are still required to undertake mutual obligations, meet with their service provider, have appointments, fill out job plans that outline what activities they will do, how they'll engage with the employment service, etc. What we did and what was announced in the budget was that the activities that they sign up to in those compulsory job plans, like all job seekers in Australia, but those activities that they sign up to will be voluntary, which means that the job service provider will work with the job seeker, draw up a plan, say now what's going to meet your needs and aspirations, and then they can go out and voluntarily participate in those different activities.
But the mutual obligation component of that appears to have dropped, from my understanding, in reports back to me from communities, and I'm just trying to understand why you've done that when you're still trying to obviously work out what the next phase of this program is going to look like.
So the compliance system that applied to activities is now voluntary, not compulsory. But job seekers have a range of compulsory activities, including meeting with their...
But I'm just asking why you made that decision.
So what we've
without the consultation and discussion with those providers out there, it's just turned everything on its head. People are a little bit confused, and this is. I'm just trying to understand how you came to making that decision immediately the day after the budget was announced.
It was announced as part of the budget.
In terms of removing the compulsory
So, Senator,
component.
what we've seen over the last few years is that service providers use a range of different tools for encouraging job seekers to participate in their activities in the community, their CDP activities. There's been lesser reliance.
You've just suddenly become very generous in terms of removing... No, Mr. Borman, hear me out. Seriously.
Of course, sorry.
We've sat here at the Senate estimates over the last 5-6 years. I've been talking to you about the penalties and the impact that those penalties, compulsory penalties, have had on people. And all of a sudden, overnight, you decide to remove the compulsory nature of it. Now, I'd be the first one to be happy about that. I'm just trying to understand what the process was that led to it, which then immediately created confusion amongst providers who no longer have to... who say to participants, now we don't actually really have to turn up now, but you'll still get your money.
So Senator,
I'm just wondering how you made that decision.
So this started in 2019. It actually started before 2019. The government
What started that? The compulsory nature was still there right up until the budget.
The increased flexibility in the program started in 2019 with a range of changes. There was a series of changes that was proposed to the Parliament in 2019 that didn't pass, so we made a number of programmatic changes which made the application of activities or the requirements of job seekers to participate in those activities far more flexible. So they had different hours they can work in. The way they interacted with their provider was far more flexibly done. So that's been quite successful. So building on that, Senator, is that we then say, okay, the trend of attendance, job seekers attending activities, has been relatively stable while service providers are using different tools of engaging job seekers. We want to encourage that trend. So building on 2019, we're continuing to encourage service providers on this trend of using other tools to engage job seekers into the program. So on that basis, we said you still have some compulsory obligations. You have to come in and sit down with your provider, fill out a job plan and set up a series of activities. But from now on, what will be voluntary is the participation. So you can work more closely with your service provider in a voluntary way, where there's an element of personal responsibility as well as a different way of service providers engaging their job seeker to make sure you do show up and participate in the program. So it's been a continuous improvement building on those 2018-19 changes.
Mr. Bullman, will breaching and penalties over breaching still exist?
For some activities such as not attending your appointment, rejecting work, etc., penalties will still apply.
And what will those penalties be?
They're the same penalties that are in place under the whole social security system. No
so
show,
the removal
no
of any payment for 8 weeks?
So that's a significant failure under the system, under the social security system can result in an 8-week suspension. But so the same penalties apply to all job seekers if you don't meet your obligation of meeting your service provider.
Yeah, but we're not talking about all job seekers, are we? We're talking about the 40,000 odd cohort under the CDP program, where you've just announced the removal of compulsory working compulsory sort of approach to the activities.
Yep.
That it's voluntary, yet you still have a breaching penalty rate. I don't understand why you'd maintain that.
Okay, so there are different obligations for a job seeker across all of Australia. One of their obligations is they have to engage with their employment service, whether that's Job Active if they're living in cities and towns, or CDP in remote areas. Right, if they don't meet their provider, they could be breached under the compliance framework. However, the change that we've made in CDP recently is that they can volunteer to do other activities, their community activities, their work for the dole activities, those kind of things. So we've made a shift on voluntary attendance at those activities, but there are absolutely compulsory activities compulsory obligations still that they have to do under the system.
So you're breaching a participant if they don't turn up for a meeting, and we've had these conversations many times when we know that there's things that happen, sorry business, flooding, people can't have access to a phone to be able to ring, and so you're going to breach participants now still for not turning up for a meeting?
Not for those circumstances, Senator, because there's there's providers that work on the ground with community, and if someone is ill, has ceremony business, can't make it because of weather or other things, then they've got the discretion to recommend to the Department of Services Australia, that the person had a valid reason for not attending, and that's quite a regular occurrence. Sally couldn't make it to the appointment because her kids are sick or something else happened in life. Therefore, she has a valid reason, they'll reschedule. However, if there's someone that's maybe more recalcitrant, trying to not participate in their obligations on a regular basis, then there's an option for the service providers across Australia, and this is broader than just CDP but includes CDP, to recommend to Services Australia that person receives a penalty or a suspension. That's a good tool that enables service providers, our CDP providers or Job Active, to bring people back into the system and sit them down and say, why aren't you attending? What can we do to help you meet your needs and aspirations? Is it that you didn't like that activity, or you prefer this activity, or it doesn't work in your lifestyle at the moment? How do we adjust things to meet your needs?
So we've